Welcome back to the channel, Refinish with Jade. In today's video, we're going to be taking this Tallboy and giving it a modern update. So let's go. This Tallboy was actually in really good condition and was going to need very little repairs. First things first, I had to give it a really good clean. I mixed up some degreaser and then grabbed an attachment for my drill and started to clean the piece. You don't need to use an attachment on a drill, this can easily be done by hand with a cloth, but I wanted to save time. I'm often asked why I clean the piece before I sand it. There's two main reasons why I do this. The first one is it stops all of my sanding discs getting clunked up, and the second is because if there's oil and grime on the piece, that can get pushed into the timber fibers with the sander. Make sure you get into all the hard to reach areas and the nooks and crannies. This cleaning component is going to happen twice with every piece of furniture that you refinish. Usually you're going to clean the piece before you sand it, and then you're going to clean it again after you've completed the sanding to remove all the sanding dust before painting. I knew I didn't want to keep these timber handles, so I went through and removed all of the handles. I find these timber handles really date a piece, and I almost always change them when I have these timber style handles. On almost every piece I do, I like to have some exposed timber component for multiple reasons, but for one, I just love the aesthetic and the look when you have timber and paint joined together. There are so many different ways that you can remove the old varnish off a piece of furniture. The main two are sanding and paint stripper. If you choose to go down the sanding road, the same as I do most of the time, just as a personal preference because I prefer sanding, you then have so many different tools available to you to be able to sand the piece. If you regularly watch my makeovers, you'll notice that I usually start off with a belt sander to remove the top varnish on any flat surfaces. The belt sander can't be used on any detail areas or any curves, but it's a really great fast way to remove the varnish off large flat surfaces. As a quick tip, if you're going to use a belt sander on drawers, make sure you step inside the drawer to hold it still. I go through all of the places that I can with the belt sander first, and then I swap over to my orbital sander. You always need to start with a high grit first. I start with an 80 grit usually, but if the piece of timber is quite soft, you might find you need to start with a 120 grit. Then once you've removed all of the original varnish, you then can move to a higher grit such as a 240 grit to smoothen out and make a really nice surface. Being honest, this can be really quite time consuming. Because I decided to sand the front of all 6 drawers and the top of this piece, I did spend about an hour and a half all up sanding to get this piece back to where I wanted it to be before I could start painting it. If you're a beginner or if you're doing this on a project where time really is of the essence, you may decide that you don't want to have as many areas as raw exposed timber and save yourself a little bit of time in the sanding process. Once I had all the areas that I wanted to have as exposed timber sanded back, I then grabbed out my battery orbital sander and gave the rest of the piece a scuff sand to wrap up the surface so that my paint was going to stick really well. I usually recommend this on every piece you do because it's a really great way to prepare the surface. I gave it all a quick sweep to remove the dust before I cleaned again. You can use an attachment to your sander, and I do have one. I was just being lazy with this process and I didn't apply it for this particular job. For this second clean, I just use a sponge and I don't usually use my drill attachment again because by this stage I've removed all of the thick layers of grime. I'm just removing the sanding dust before I paint. at the Annie Sloan satin paint. It says that no primer is necessary, so I'm not going to be priming the piece. I have scuff sanded and cleaned thoroughly the piece with the Triclinium degreaser, and now I'm going to be applying the paint directly onto this Tallboy.
This paint was surprisingly easy to use. It was like butter to apply. It just painted on so smoothly. If you choose to paint your piece of furniture a dark colour, you will notice that you don't get a huge amount of coverage on your first coat, but that's nothing to be concerned about. You're just going to need to potentially do an extra coat to get that really nice, solid, thick coverage. I don't know if you're like me, but there's something to me that's really therapeutic and enjoyable about watching painting in fast motion. I know some people, when things are really boring to watch, there's a saying that goes something along the lines of, it's as boring as watching paint dry, but we're not watching paint dry, first of all, and second of all, it's actually really therapeutic to me to sit here and watch this in fast motion. So I'm going to let you sit and enjoy the painting process. Now I know someone is going to comment and tell me that painting by hand is so much slower and that I should be paint spraying. Don't get me wrong, I love to use a paint sprayer as well. But the reason I started refinishing furniture in the first place was because it was really therapeutic to me and was helping me get through my mental health battles with postnatal depression at the time. 6 years on, I still love to paint by hand because it gives me that same emotional feeling that it did the first time I started. Painting by hand also enables me to show you what is possible with very minimal tools and very little experience. Once I finished painting all 3 coats of the charcoal paint, I decided that I wanted to change the colour of the timber a little bit. Yes, the natural colour of the timber was beautiful, but I just wanted to add a little bit of a grey undertone in. Here I'm applying a driftwood staining glaze. I paint it onto the timber and then use a rag to wipe back the excess to get it to the colour and the overall consistency that I want it to be. And once again, I'm going to let you enjoy watching the application process because this too is fun to watch.
Oh gosh, I need a screwdriver.
Now it's time to apply a top coat onto the timber to protect it. You'll see there that I really struggled to open this can of my polyacrylic, and I used the screwdriver to unlock the lid where it had actually been sealed shut. I'm using a sponge to apply this clear polyacrylic because I find it the easiest way to apply the top coat without getting any streaks. I let it dry in between and applied 3 coats all up. I then applied new hardware to the piece. Sometimes selecting the hardware can actually be one of the hardest parts. It is actually really difficult to pick which hardware is going to suit the piece perfectly. I had about 4 different types of hardware I alternated with before I settled on these gorgeous herringbone knobs.
Now here it is, the end result.